Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Tia Graham. Now, I'm sure you've just heard that Nancy Guthrie, the mother of Today's Show host Savannah Guthrie, is missing. She has been missing for over a week. And over the past weeks, we've gotten daily updates on the status of this heartbreaking case. But have you heard about Zanaya Ware or Jade Johnson? Or how about Zanaya Harris? Or Katerine Padilla Avila? Those are just a few teenage girls from the Detroit area right now who are missing. Some have been missing for months, others for years. Why don't we hear about these missing children? Why don't we know their names and see their pictures on our timelines? According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, there are over 700 children and teenagers in the U.S. who went missing in the last year and have not been found. 90% of missing children cases are solved according to the center. But what about the ones that aren't? Why do their names and faces fade out of the headlines so quickly? Unseen is a play produced by Detroit-based nonprofit Teen Hype that addresses the thousands of Black girls whose stories fit this narrative at a disproportionate rate. Ambra Redrick is the co-founder and CEO of the organization, and Mallory Childs is the director of Unseen and a Teen Hype alum. They join me now to discuss the play and the issues that it inspired it. Mallory, welcome to the Metro.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, and Ambra, welcome back to the Metro.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So, Ambra, starting with you, why did you decide to produce this particular play centered around the important but very heavy topic of missing Black girls?
I didn't. Our young people did. They do a beautiful job of researching topics and making difficult decisions about what are the relevant issues that need to be highlighted. And after months of research and spending some time talking about what violence means, this is the topic that they came up with.
And, just to dig into it just a little bit further, what did that gathering session or what did those gathering sessions look like? What did the conversations look like with the teens as you're trying to break down such heavy topics that impact them every day?
So each year at the end of our theater production, our young people the audience gets to take an evaluation. And we ask them about what kind of topics do they think that we need to talk about as we get ready to produce the next production. We bring that back to the young people and we have lots of conversation about how to synthesize this, how to get it broken down to a few smaller topics. And then when we get down to about 3 topics, then our young people go off and we watch documentaries, we go on field trips, we invite guest speakers in to begin to unpack and to really understand the direction that we want to go. And the young people just keep picking away. I'm always amazed, always.
That's amazing. And Mallory, bringing you into the conversation because you're the director of Unseen. Now, when you received the information that the teens had collected, the data, what was going through your mind when you were beginning to write the production?
Yeah, for me, I think I've always wanted to kind of have the opportunity to write about this topic, and I think it's very admirable and just amazing that the young people also deemed it as important. I, too, am a young person, so to see that we were kind of all in that same space really did mean a lot to me. I think the stories that we talk about throughout Unseen are so extremely important. And the first thing that kind of went through my mind is I just want to hear their voices. I just want to hear what the young people think, what they want to say, what they want the message to be, and ultimately what we want it communicated to the audience.
And Mallory, you're a sophomore at Spelman right now. Why did you want to write about this subject? What really set your soul on fire when you saw that the teens chose this particular topic?
Definitely. I think with going to Spelman, there's a certain value of Black womanhood that ultimately kind of comes into your heart. Being surrounded by so many Black women of just, so many different lifestyle, so many different looks, so many different just things in general. Being in an atmosphere that shows us that Black women are not a monolith, it's so important. Our presence is so important. And the things that we have to say is so important. Our value is so important. So to see that there are so many not only missing Black girls, but missing Black children in the world is just disheartening, because we add so much value to the spaces that we're in. And being at Spelman, I've been able to realize that and walk into that even more, knowing that we have a voice and we have a presence that's worth valuing, a presence that's worth honoring. So that just comes to speak to the importance of speaking out on all these missing individuals, because people are overlooking these stories constantly every day. We see so many other perspectives of, missing individuals plastered everywhere, all over the world. But then when it comes to the conversation about Black girls and missing Black women and missing Black boys and missing Black men, we turn away from it. We don't necessarily look at it and analyze it as much as we should, and the government tends to shy away from the topic in itself. So to see that the young people deem that as important as well, and that it lined up perfectly with the interests that I have and something that I definitely want to look into, was just admirable and amazing.
Mallory, staying with you for a moment, you're a Teen Hype alum. And I want to know, how much did you learn from Ambra and so many of the other adults that were around you at the time and your peers? What did you learn and what did you gather from Teen Hype in order to lead you to where you are today, writing Unseen for the kids?
Yeah, honestly, so much. I think the question is really, what didn't I learn? Like, I was able to join the program when I was 12, almost 13 years old, and they raised me in more ways than one. So many of the staff members, as well as Miss Red, have seen me through so many different phases of my life and have loved me through each and every one of them. So being, a member of the program and then going into the alumni, it kind of just felt full circle, like to be in this position to where I was once being like a production manager for one of the productions, and now being able to be one of the writers for the past couple of shows has just really meant a lot to me. And they've taught me just perseverance. They've taught me how to push through. They've taught me how to just use my voice. Ultimately, I think I was a little shy when I first joined the program, but they definitely put me in the position to be able to use my voice and, to do it scared, to do it, just terrified, but I still was able to do it. And they were always there to catch me if I ever fell. And even to this day, with being, hundreds of miles away here in Atlanta at Spelman College, they still constantly will call, they'll text, they'll check in, and they'll give me these opportunities continuously, just granting me the opportunity to be able to practice my craft.
So once again, sticking with you, Mallory, since you are the director, you wrote it, talk about the production. Is there a main character? Are there multiple main characters? What should people know about the production before they step inside to watch it?
Yes, I am very thankful to say that I am one of the writers, alongside 3 other amazing staff members at Teen Hype. I can never sit here and say that I did it all by myself, because nothing at Teen Hype is done with just one single individual. It's all about hardworking and team-based environments. So yes, there's main characters. And I don't want to, spoil too much of it, but just to say there are 2 main Black girls that do take on just the perspective and the lens of what it looks like and feels like to be unseen, and what it looks like to just be invisible to society. And I think they really do take on this lens and this just amazing approach of just raw, intentional emotion, allowing the audience to feel like they're a part of the story. And that's just the beauty of theater and play productions, especially done by Teen Hype. We always want to ensure that people feel as if they have a place within our story and that their voice does matter, and that ultimately the things that we have to advocate for as a community are seen somewhere in every aspect of the production. So yes, there are our main characters. There are also our secondary characters, but all of them definitely contribute to just the flow and the ebb of the story overall.
And just hearing you talk about the production, of course, not giving away just too much yet, there are 2 characters in the story. So to clarify, I would like to know, is one character possibly going to go missing, or is this a secret that we can't talk about yet?
This is a secret that, we can give a little hint to, but one of the characters definitely is going missing. We're just exploring the different ways that she could have possibly gotten to that position, and just, not necessarily blaming it on the girl and not blaming it on the victim. I think very often people tend to victim blame and not understand that everything has a root cause to it. So we're just exploring those different barriers and societal injustices that put her in the position to be unseen and to feel invisible.
And Ambra, Unseen is a production. It's a multimedia production. What does that mean when we talk about it being a production and being just more than a stage play?
It means that it's our call to action. It's our opportunity for our young people to highlight something that's really, really important. And we certainly believe that every child is our child to protect. And this is our way of putting the community on notice, reminding everyone of their collective responsibility. It is a way for our young people to center their voices, find their voices, and remind people the value of every child.
We're talking about Unseen, a new production by Teen Hype about how Black girls go missing in the U.S. Our guests are the CEO of Teen Hype, Ambra Redrick, and director of Unseen, Mallory Childs. Now, Mallory, when you were presented with the topic of missing Black girls and the feeling of being unseen, especially as a young person yourself, thinking about trying to find that emotional connection, what were some of the through lines that you wanted to make sure? I know you were talking with other writers as well, but what were some things that you wanted to make sure were consistent throughout the entire production?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was the visibility of the victim. Like I had kind of mentioned before, people do tend to victim blame and blame it on the person that actually is enduring whatever form of oppression it may be. I just thought it was really important to make sure that the story and what led up to it and the root cause were all being highlighted and spotlighted within the story, because there are so many different layers to what this looks like. And it's more than just, someone just, magically went missing one day. No, there's so many different layers that contribute to how that happens. So I just wanted to make sure that we were staying true and authentic to the story of the victim and giving them that platform to show that, there are so many different barriers to this. There are so many different things that may have led up to the disappearance of our main character. So I just felt it was really important to remain authentic to the true voice of the victim.
Now, Unseen makes sure to explore the emotional toll losing a family member has on the unit, just the emotional toll that losing someone has on the community in general. Ambra, City Bureau and the Invisible Institute's investigative series Missing in Chicago expose how Chicago police repeatedly mishandled missing person cases, especially those involving Black women and girls. It was a deep investigation report that uncovered systemic bias in Chicago. So, Ambra, how do instances like this erode trust teens should have for the systems in place to protect them, such as police and the judicial system?
I think what's really, really sad about kids that often go unseen is not just the fact that they're missing, but our society is so busy we don't even know they're missing. We're inundated with so many things, and what ends up happening, I think, oftentimes is we send messages subconsciously to young people that they are not valued, that their life does not actually matter, because we don't prioritize, we don't keep up. We tell ourselves stories like Detroiters are transient, and this kid ran away. That this other child might be promiscuous. And I think oftentimes it's a failure. It's a deep, deep failure to our children.
You brought up runaway because one of the things that I really wanted to talk about was just this idea of a runaway, or as I had been seeing a lot of the times, Ambra, reading and discovering more information about the missing Black girls and missing teens in general, a lot of the time the information presented is the girl left without permission or someone ran away. So when we hear that and we hear those details, how did you, number one, put that detail, or how did you guys display that detail within the production? But Ambra, when you talk about that runway, what does it do to the visibility or the invisibility of that teen that's deemed a runaway or someone who's deemed as a bad kid?
Yeah. It's a lie, right? Like it's a terrible myth that we continue to perpetuate in our society, that it's only the bad kids, it's only the promiscuous kids, it's the fast girls that often get in trouble, and that they've done something wrong. We don't acknowledge that oftentimes kids are groomed, and that now with technology, it happens in all the craziest ways, and that we have this responsibility to pay attention to all of those things, and that it's not just those kind of kids, that there's often the A+ kid, it's often the quiet kid, it's often the kid that learns differently, it's often the girl whose mom is like super busy, and it's often the dad that might be away, or it's just an everyday kid. It doesn't have to necessarily be a kid that is running away. It could be a kid that's under-resourced. but not necessarily.
And excuse me, and Ambra, just hearing you talk about that, and you were saying, of course, just the invisibility of it all, the feeling of these kids, are runaways, they're bad kids, they may not be this or they may not be that. How do we begin to change that perspective of those conversations? Does the language matter? Does the way that we approach the kids or in the families matter? Like, in what ways do you talk to community members, people within Teen Hype, about the visibility of kids?
Yeah, I think a lot of times at Teen Hype, we're having conversations about, like, I always say, like, eyes up. Like, we have to look when we're in the classroom. We are not just in the classroom, but we're present, and that we get to know every single young person in that classroom, and we take the time to check and to see, is everything okay, to make sure that they have resources if it's not, to pay attention to those red flags that oftentimes our administrators are too busy to see, to pay attention to when we see our young people's having some kind of behavior changes, to notice when they are quiet, to notice who's picking them up from school, who they get in the car with, who they are communicating with online, on the phone, that we pay attention, that we have to see. And it's harder to see, right? Like, it's so much more challenging to see with social media and with a phone, because I can't necessarily directly see. Back in my day, my grandmother could pick up the phone and she could eavesdrop, literally. But now it's much more challenging in order to do that, but we have to be vigilant.
Yes. Just thinking about everything that you just talked about, of course, we're going to get back to the conversation. We're going to go to a quick break because I want to make sure that we continue to talk about this more in depth, especially continue to talk about teens who are unseen in general, because the play is also going to cover, the production, is also going to cover teens who are missing in general. So once again, we're going on the break. When we do come back, we will continue to discuss Teen Hype's production of Unseen. And once again, this is The Metro. This is The Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Tia Graham. We're talking about Unseen, a new production by Teen Hype about how Black girls go missing in the U.S. My guests are the CEO of Teen Hype, Ambra Redrick, and director of Unseen, Mallory Childs. Now, when a missing child goes missing, the community responds with informal searches like social media or grassroots organizing. And when you see responses like this, what does it say about the systems that are supposed to protect all missing children? Ambra, I'm going to start with you.
I think it says, when we do it right, what it says is that our children are important. I think that oftentimes the best work that we do is on the ground, right? Is when we have proximity to children. And so those grassroots efforts often are the things that allow us to find our babies, because oftentimes the police are, so far removed or inundated with other things, but it is auntie paying attention. It is those flyers, those phone calls, and, just backing up and being really, really diligent about finding them. And it is a reminder to our kids that we are here and that we are holding that mantle and that responsibility, and they don't have to worry.
Yeah. Mallory, I want to ask you the same question, because when you see grassroots organizing, especially for you, young person on social media, you may see different type of searches or campaigns going on to find and locate missing girls. For you, when you see the community responding in this way, what does it tell you about the missing children and the systems that are in place that are supposed to protect them?
Yeah, truthfully, I would have to agree with Miss Red. I think me as the writer, as alongside our two amazing directors, Mr. Don and Miss Cherry, we made sure that ultimately the message pushed out, one of the multiple messages pushed out, was that the youth are important, and that it's really disheartening to see so many different forms of oppression against young people, and to see how people are just so easily overlooking just the disappearance of human beings, of children, of young people that contribute a lot to the advancement of the world overall. So it is very disheartening, and I think it sends so many messages about how society and how these systems shape what they deem as important in the world. And I think very often people are so disconnected from things that don't necessarily affect them, things that they don't think necessarily affects them. But this is an issue that, reigns important to all of us. It is something that we all need to be all hands on deck for. So it's extremely disheartening, but we want to send that message out that young people do matter and their presence is very valuable.
Ambra, when a Black girl goes missing and the system doesn't act fast, how does that failure impact families emotionally? You've been working with teens and youth for over 20 years now with Teen Hype, 21 years. What have you seen in your time working with youth when you do lose one of your children in the program, and what is that impact on the community?
Oh, I think for families, it can be heartbreaking, right? It will tear apart a whole family with blame, sometimes shame, because the assumption is, like we talked about earlier, that if a child goes missing, particularly a girl, she must have been doing something that she had no business doing, which means that she also must have had a really bad parent, an absent parent, or a parent that wasn't paying attention. And so we are a very accusatory society. And so I think oftentimes what happens in families is that you get bottled up in this shame and this turmoil, and it pulls and it distracts from the most important thing, right? Taking care of our babies and finding them.
And what about the collective grief a community feels when one of their own go missing? We just talked a little bit about that, but from your perspective, how often have you been here, or do you hear teens say no? This is from Mallory. Say no one cares about them in regards to the systems in place to protect missing persons. So I'm going to ask you the same thing, Ambra, but Mallory, I want to ask you from a young person's perspective, someone who was just recently a teen yourself. When you hear this collective grief that is outpouring, especially on social media for missing girls, what goes through your mind?
I think if anything, it really is just tragic, and it's something that is so sad because people, are putting young people in the position to not understand the value of their worth. And I think that's extremely disheartening because, I'll hear young people speak about issues and how they'll express they don't feel welcome, they don't feel loved, they don't feel as if they're being paid attention to. And it's very tragic to hear because there's this ongoing pattern within just generations to come before us that our disappearance it's an assumption. It's an assumption that we were doing something we weren't supposed to be doing. We were with people we weren't supposed to be with. And very often they're not understanding how important it is for us to feel nurtured and feel like we're seen. So I think so many things will go through my mind ultimately, and it'll just be heartbreaking to hear my peers and, young people around me express these really, really sad things because there's so much value in our worth, and we have so much to offer. We have so much to give to the world. We've already given so much. But yet when we disappear and we're no longer here, it's as if people are just, on to the next. And it's sad because these are human beings. These are someone's, daughter, someone's son, someone's brother, someone's sister. These are valuable beings. So I definitely do believe it to be something that's extremely disheartening. I think that might just be the key word of this conversation. Really is just sad and disheartening, and it's just so tragic to hear people not understanding how important it is that they're here.
Yeah. And Ambra, this is an artistic pursuit. So how do you all balance the seriousness of this subject in the creative medium you use to highlight it?
Oh, well, I think theater is this beautiful opportunity to create a space for healing. I often say that our young people that are in the audience should be able to find themselves on stage. So you can see a young person working through something, and you can see the power of what can happen when we come together. I love, one of the other things that I really love about theater is that I think it gives this experience that regardless of how you learn, there's space for you there. So you can see it, you can hear it, you can In some ways, you can even touch it through art. There are so many ways that we are being thoughtful about making sure that every young person can be impacted by this story.
Yes.
And can we go back to collective grief?
Oh, please. No, 100%, Ambra, please.
Because I was thinking about one of the sad things about collective grief in our community is that it's what makes us stop talking, right? That when oftentimes we find out that our babies are missing, we hear this tragic, horrible story that gets covered when a child is found and perhaps that child is killed. And then what happens is that it's so heartbreaking for us, we stop talking. And when we stop talking, then the action stops. And then we can't come up and figure out what we're going to do to prevent it the next time because it hurts so much, we bury it.
And I'm thinking, of course, this, when you're in community, you're sitting down, you're listening to people, and it's just like Mallory said, you hear them say, "This is sad. This is so sad. Oh, this is so sad." Mm-hmm. But what comes out of that conversation after those simple words are spoken out?
Usually nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in what ways can we truly see and acknowledge marginalized teens and help protect them and support their overall safety and growth? Hearing what you're talking about, hearing about just grief and what the impact truly is on a community, on a family, on peers, on just teachers, everyone around who's involved, in what ways can we truly start to see and acknowledge the teens and protect them the most?
I think our first job is to notice. And it seems so simple, but it's really difficult because I can just imagine what the level of responsibility we all have day to day, that teacher, that coach. But step one is definitely to notice, report. So we're going to stop making assumptions that, the kid moved, the child switched districts, that everything is okay. But we need to actually report it and sometimes report it again. And we need to correct language about runaways and versus missing. We need to be really, really clear about that when we're communicating. We need to demand that we have equal media coverage and to not let our babies just float off, but to actually prioritize their well-being and to make sure that we are watching for signs and all of the red flags that come up when we see a child's behavior changing. Because all missing is not just, the way we thought of it, again, back in my day, like a kid getting snatched. But it's not always like that. And in fact, we know now that most times it's not. It is a slow process of grooming, a slow process of pulling you out of the community. And in some what's scary is that you aren't pulled out, right? Like you still are there. If you're being trafficked, you're there. We just don't know.
And that's the invisible aspect that you're talking about. We're talking about Unseen, a new production by Teen Hype. Our guests are the CEO of Teen Hype, Ambra Redrick, and Director of Unseen, Mallory Childs. Now, overall, just thinking about Unseen and what it means itself, of course, Unseen covers missing Black girls and the rippling impact it has on a community. But you are going to also just talk about those teens who just are not being seen, whether it be they have a learning disability and no one's addressing that, or maybe they're dealing with, violence at home and no one's addressing that. There could be so many different ways a teen is feeling unseen and unloved. How do you, Mallory, this is for you, how do you explore feeling unseen within the production, and how are you displaying it?
Yeah, I would say even with one of our main characters that's simply searching for who's missing, she comes in a lot of contact with situations where people are not hearing her. They're not understanding why this topic is so important. They're not understanding why it's so important that they pay attention, that they listen up. And while she isn't the one that's missing, her voice still isn't being heard because she's communicating something that's making people uncomfortable, and people don't want to hear it because they don't want to believe that they may have possibly been a contributor to it. So we're able to explore that. And then also within all of our Teen Hype productions, we find it so important to also discover the topic of just mental health and the conversation about mental well-being and how youth very often are overlooked when it comes to when they express themselves emotionally. So there are a lot of different forms of dialogue and conversation where they're talking about just how they're feeling. And, the generations around them and the people that are of an older age aren't necessarily hearing them and aren't listening to them. And even sometimes their peers are kind of just, scrubbing off their shoulder and just not necessarily deeming it as something that's important. So we're constantly in conversation throughout the production where we're exploring that topic, definitely.
And Ambra, what difference can visibility make when we talk about this particular topic of missing Black girls, but in general, unseen teens? What difference does that visibility make? How does it all tie into keeping the youth safe?
Oh, well, to be seen is what we all desire, right? So for our young people, for them to know that there is an adult that has their eyes on them, that sees their well-being, that is interested, that is invested in making sure that they are well, has to be the most validating and rewarding and encouraging emotion that I can think of. It allows a young person to be free, right? To know that they are safe and they are cared for and that they are loved.
Ambra is the CEO of Teen Hype, and Mallory is an alum of the organization and director of Unseen. Unseen will debut on March 6th at the Proctor Educational and Performing Arts Center in Taylor. Ambra and Mallory, thank you both so much for joining us on the Metro and talking so much about this very important topic of missing Black girls.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Coming up, a piano tests the limits of a family dynamic in the Detroit Repertory Theater's latest production, The Piano Lesson. We'll hear from the cast of the play and how they would handle the dilemmas at the center of the play. Stay right there. We'll be right back. This is The Metro.